ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Obviously, the world is still fascinated by what happened with the Daniel Penny case. Fascinated, horrified, interested is certainly an apt description. You know, some of the analysis that I've seen today has been from legal pundits analyzing the legal aspect of this. Other aspects of this that I've seen analyzed is from a law enforcement perspective. And then others are just reporters that were there in the courtroom when it happened. Well, I am very, very pleased to tell you that we are talking to probably the only man who can speak on all three subjects with some authority. We're very, very pleased to be joined once again by Judge George Grasso, retired New York City Criminal Court Judge who served as the Supervising Judge for the Bronx Criminal Court and the Administrative Judge for Criminal Matters in Queens Supreme Court. He's also a 30-year veteran of the NYPD, having served as the first Deputy Police Commissioner, and if that weren't enough, he was actually in the courtroom when the verdict was read. Judge George Grasso, it's great to talk to you again.
Great to be with you, Frank. Thanks for having me.
So, Judge, I know that you've indicated you think that this was the right verdict the jury reached. For people that haven't been paying too close attention to the case, tell us why.
Well, because I don't think the case should have been brought in the first place. The case here, when the one thing that the prosecution and the defense agree on right from the beginning is that Mr. Daniel Penny was a good man doing the right thing for the right reasons when he began his interactions with Jordan Neely. So from the prosecution's point of view, he only stopped being, the first minute of the altercation, good guy. Second minute, good guy. Third minute, good guy. By the fourth minute, when the video that they had this 5-minute video, Mr. Penny isn't fighting as much, then it's a maybe. By the fifth minute, they're charging him with manslaughter and criminal negligent homicide. It just is kind of beyond the pale that they would make that kind of leap. And I believed, and my instinct when I first read about this case, that is only solidified more as the case progressed and through the last week of trial and deliberations in which I was in the courthouse, is that Mr. Penny, I believe, is a scapegoat for a criminal justice system that failed miserably here. So, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is, in certain circles, I just actually watched a 10 p.m. CNN segment hosted by Audie Cornish, and Arthur Idala happened to be participating in that segment. It just concluded, and it was introduced describing Mr. Neely as a street performer, who was engaging in some unstable activity, and then the next thing he's accosted by Mr. Penny, and he ends up dead. Well, in fact, at the time of this incident, Jordan Neely stood convicted. He was a convicted felon of a violent assault on a 67-year-old woman where he punched her in the face and he gave her a major orbital fracture, basically broke open her face.
Right.
And in addition to several other crimes he was convicted with, that was in February of 23, he took that conviction. Prior to that, in 2019, he was convicted for violently attacking other people on the subway and spent 90 days in jail. He then walked out of a facility in February of 23. He should have been in jail, in my opinion, for those violent crimes, and he was able to walk out of a facility and be warranted. And he had this warrant open from the end of February right through May 1st of 2023. Now, where is this happening? In Manhattan, where Alvin Bragg, with his day one memo when he first became DA, among other things, made it clear he was eviscerating police authority for all sorts of violent some crimes that were somewhat violent, like assault 3, resisting arrest of police officers, certainly crimes like fare evasion and petty larceny. Why do I bring that up? Well, for 2 months with this felony warrant for a violent convicted felon was basically living on the subway. Was he paying the fare? Yeah. Any one day over those 2 months, any one time, the NYPD, it would have engaged with him as they did when I was first deputy police commissioner, when I was a captain working with Bill Braden. We were using fare evasion to maintain a safe system. And one of the reasons you do that is you can run a warrant check and you can see if someone has a gun, if someone has a knife. If that had been done, Mr. Neely's felony warrant would have popped, and yes, he would have went to jail. Hopefully he would have went to jail and gotten psychiatric help, which he desperately needed, but he would have been alive. And Mr. Penny would have gone about his business. So what does Alvin Bragg do when confronted with these facts? He finds his way into a grand jury and makes a presentation to a grand jury that ultimately leads to manslaughter in the second degree, a C felony, for which Mr. Penny could have spent 5 to 15 years in jail, and criminally negligent homicide, an E felony, for which he could have spent up to 4 years in jail. So as I was processing all of this in court, I believe the only fair thing that the jury could do would be to find Mr. Penny not guilty. But I have to tell you, having said all that, I was actually stunned in the courtroom today when the jury unanimously found Mr. Penny not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. The reason for that is because flashback to Friday afternoon, the jury had sent the judge, Judge Maxwell Wiley, multiple notes indicating that they were deadlocked on the manslaughter in the second degree charge, which led the defense counsel to move for a mistrial on both counts, because in this case, the jury had been charged by Judge Wiley that before they could reach criminally negligent homicide, they would have to have a unanimous verdict on manslaughter in the second degree. Obviously, if they had a unanimous verdict of guilty of manslaughter in the second degree, the criminally negligent homicide, a lesser included offense, would have been carried into that. So there'd be no reason to do a separate verdict. But had they unanimously found Mr. Penny not guilty of criminally negligent of manslaughter in the second degree, then they would have been permitted, and only then, to confer on criminally negligent homicide. So that's why the defense wanted a straight up mistrial.
Yeah.
That's also why the DA did everything they could to keep the case alive. In this case, on Friday afternoon, by taking the extraordinary step of actually making an application to the judge to dismiss manslaughter in the second degree, and then make an application. Once they did that, they could keep a criminally negligent homicide alive for the jury to consider and avoid a straight-up mistrial. After hearing both arguments, the judge decided to dismiss Man 2 on his own motion and keep the case alive Friday. And then late Friday afternoon, he said, you know what, I'm just going to let the jury go home. There's only another hour left anyway. Let them come back in fresh on Monday. So I, like many other people, and I believe including defense counsel, was expecting if there was going to be a unanimous verdict, it was going to be guilty,
right,
or there was going to be a hung jury. And I believe they believed that because on Monday today they renewed their application for a hung jury. I mean for a mistrial, but the judge denied that. So 2 hours into the proceedings this morning, or an hour and a half into the proceedings, when we were called into the courtroom with another note indicating that they had a unanimous verdict, I was thinking, well, if they have a unanimous verdict, the only logic is they're going to find Mr. Penny guilty of criminally negligent.
Right.
And I thought that would have been an injustice, but I would understand. Look, the jury was given certain facts. The judge made rulings. They rolled up their sleeves, and everything I saw, they were very diligent and acting in good faith. And then when they turned around and said not guilty, let me tell you, Frank, it was a stunning moment in the courtroom.
I can imagine.
I've never seen anything like that.
Well, I want to ask you about that in a moment. At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Judge George Grasso. You indicated some surprise at the verdict, and I was surprised. We had a lot of legal analysts on this program. All were predicting after that Friday withdrawal of that higher count that we were headed probably towards a hung jury and a mistrial. Let me ask you about that decision to drop the first count while the jury was deliberating. Obviously, I have not seen as many trials as you have, but I've observed a good many of them, and I don't ever remember the prosecution seeking to drop a count once jury deliberations have begun. I'm wondering if they had come up with a conviction on the lower count, would that have subjected Judge Wiley to possibly being overturned because he allowed that first count to be withdrawn?
There's a distinct possibility of that. The case that was cited, and the progeny of the case was Morgenthau v. Yates, and the concept behind the case is that you want to try and avoid compromise verdicts. So the argument of defense counsel is, even though the facts here were a bit different, because the top count, and it was the two same charges, by the way, in Morgenthau v. Yates.
Oh, interesting.
Manslaughter in the second degree and criminal negligent homicide. But that case involved rulings that Judge Yates made in the context of jury deliberations, not an outright dismissal of the top count by the district attorney at the time, so the jury could get to that lesser included offense. I think the defense skillfully argued that even though there was that slight difference, that the fundamental legal principle of a compromise verdict should still be applied. And I think Judge Wiley, to his credit, even when he was ruling, they said straight up, I'm not aware of any case exactly like this, but I think under the circumstances, I can do it, and I think it's right to do so. I'm going to do it. But to counsel, I respect your application, and we'll just have to ultimately see what the appellate court does if we come to that. So I think like I said, I think the defense was quite skillful in making the mistrial application straight up on Friday evening or late Friday afternoon, and then renewing it today. But, the law is funny, because think about this, Frank. Let's say on Friday afternoon, or this morning, let's just say Friday afternoon, before the DA made the application to dismiss the top count. The defense made the application at that point. Straight up, Judge, they can't come to a verdict on manslaughter in the second degree. We should get a mistrial. Let's say Judge Wiley said, I'm going to apply Morgenthau v. Yates. I think you got a good argument, granted, over people's objection. Well, that would have meant that, yes, they got their mistrial, but as we're speaking now, we might have been having a conversation about what do I think is going to to happen over the next couple of months as to whether or not DA Bragg is going to bring back Man 2, bring back criminally negligent homicide, and Penny would have who knows how many more months of his life with this cloud hanging over his head, as opposed to today, he's a free man, and both cases have been are gone. One, the top count, because the judge dismissed it on the DA's application. The second count, because a unanimous jury ruled in his favor. So that's our jury system.
Yeah.
And I think it worked wonderfully in this case.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Are there limits to the U.S. government's debt growth? What will happen if the debts are not curtailed? What should policymakers or investors do? Those are urgent questions that legendary investor and New York Times bestselling author Ray Dalio addresses in his new book, How Countries Go Broke: The Big Cycle. The book comes out in June and is available for pre-order today, wherever books are sold.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom: The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
That moment when you realize your skincare is actually working. That's Rodan & Fields, the #1 female dermatologist-founded skincare brand in the U.S. Designed by 2 dermatologists who don't just know women's skin, they know how to formulate for it. Rodan & Fields, love what you see. Tap the banner or visit rodanandfields.com/Spotify to get your exclusive welcome offer.
Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii in sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said. If your people are just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is retired Judge George Grasso, also the former First Deputy Police Commissioner of the NYPD. You described the mood room after the verdict was read as being unlike anything that you'd ever seen. I saw some of this horrific press conference that Hawk Newsom did afterwards, basically threatening everybody.
Standing right there.
Well, so tell me
right there when he did it.
Yeah, give me your take on that aspect of things. I mean, it seems like that's somebody that was just ready to throw gasoline right on the smoldering flames of any tensions that were lingering as a result of this.
Well, would you like me to tell you first exactly what happens in the courtroom?
Yeah, please.
I mean, yeah, and why I say it was like nothing I've ever seen before. Because I have seen courtrooms that kind of get loud, but usually they would get loud more towards one side or another side, not like two competing sides, like equally represented, like we had in this case. So I don't think I was the only one in the courtroom who was stunned when the jury foreman said not guilty. And I'll tell you something else that happened. Then this all ties in. Just prior to reading the verdict being read, the lead defense counsel confirms with the judge that he would want the jury polled. The only time they want the jury polled is if it's going to be a guilty. Because you want to see every juror stand up there and make sure they make a record that nobody's wobbly, you know what I mean? And Wiley, of course, agreed to that. So that's just a little bit of background. Shows you where the heads of and doing everything right, by the way. Everything I would be doing if I was in their chair. This isn't a criticism. This is just a statement of the facts on the ground in the courtroom. So the judge agrees to that. Ask the foreman. Okay, foreman, are you now ready to state? Yes. What's the verdict? Not guilty. Well, what happened is the part of the courtroom that was pro-Penny exploded first. They just let out this, cheer, like a cheer, like, yes, like at a, Aaron Judge hits a grand slam in a ninth inning kind of cheer.
Wow.
And then it's like the Neely side, they were like in stunned silence. And then this happened, and the pro-Penny people let out this cheer. And then the Neely people just, respond with like a roar. And his father, you got to give, your heart has to go out to the family, man. His father, older man, he had been there for days. He got angry, and he started screaming at the Penny supporters, and really hardcore, to the point he was warned several times, and he wouldn't stop. And the officers actually had to make a beeline into the audience, and they dragged him out. Physically, they took him physically out of the courtroom. Followed by the supporters of the of his son, and there was all of this. And meanwhile, while this is going on a parallel track, the judge is the defense counsel is telling the judge, I don't need to poll the jury. I'm waiving my request. And Wiley, who's a low key judge, is like, did you ever read or see Bonfire of the Vanities?
Sure, I've read it. Yes,
this was right out of Bonfire of the Vanities, except that was fiction. But this was right out of Bonfire of the Vanities. And then the judge just basically said, okay, we're ending these proceedings. Jury's excused. They were moving the panel out. They got the parties out. And it was like kind of being at the OK Corral.
That is wild. I mean, I know you had a ringside seat for history during the Trump trial, but talk about having a ringside seat for legal and New York history. My goodness, that is incredible.
I know how to pick them.
That's for sure. That's for sure. I don't want you at my next trial, I'll tell you that. All right, give me, we're almost out of time, and I also have to get your thoughts on the arrest of this shooter, the United CEO, but give me your quick take on the Hawk Newsom reaction.
Yeah, so what happened was, the reason I saw that is because Fox 5 had requested that I do a street interview outside immediately following the verdict, no matter what it was. So I had to make a beeline outside across the street, to follow up with Fox 5, as I promised that I would. It just happened that the Fox 5 setup was right by where that individual decided to, give his fired-up speech. And it was a little wild there because, frankly, the NYPD, to my surprise, originally didn't have a firm control of the perimeter, between where the media was set up and between where I'm going to call them the Neely family protesters set themselves up. And at one point, they actually were pushing one of the barricades over. Fortunately, the NYPD, ultimately came in and nothing bad happened. But it was a little in the middle of this, I'm giving an interview to Fox 5, saying a lot of the things I just said to you. And so that individual, Newsom, he got up and, he was roaring, doing the BLM kind of thing. We don't get justice in America, we have racist country, and, kind of playing into the crowd with that. And Neely's father was there, in the middle of the whole thing. I mean, to me, like I said, this whole thing is a tragedy. I understand anger. I understand, especially you see the father's pain.
Of course.
But I believe fervently that D.A. Bragg was scapegoating Daniel Penny for all of these other failures in the criminal justice system, starting with his own with the Day One memo. Daniel Penny was not a vigilante in any classic sense of the word. He was a young 25-year-old man on his way to the gym, minding his own business. And then he was confronted, and the other people were confronted in the train with an individual who was having clearly having a psychotic episode, who they didn't know at the time, but in fact was a convicted felon with a repeated history of violently injuring people. This was not like a guy who was like the Michael Jackson performer having like a bad day and yelling at somebody and getting leaped on by a wannabe vigilante. He was out of control. He was acting in a dangerous, threatening manner where certain people even believed their lives could be at risk. And this young trained Marine decided to put himself. And the thing when he grabbed when Penny grabbed Mr. Neely, what people need to realize, and having been a police officer, I realized certainly, and I'm sure Penny realized it, is with his training, when you do something like that, it's kind of like in for a penny, in for a pound. How does he know if Neely has a knife?
Right.
How does he know if Neely has a gun?
Right.
Once he moves to restrain him, he really needs to restrain him until proper authorities come and can totally de-escalate the situation. And in fact, the whole thing was about 6 minutes. So, yeah, unfortunately, in this case, Mr. Neely passed in that time, but that doesn't make Mr. Penny a criminal. The laws of justification for self-defense permit self-defense of self or others. And he selflessly put himself in that situation. And looking at that video evidence multiple times in the courtroom, to me, he did not go anywhere beyond the bounds. And they say chokehold. This was more of a restraint. I was trained. This wasn't a classic chokehold. This was a guy and another guy other people were helping him along the way who was trying to restrain a man who he perceived, I think in a way that was consistent with the facts on the ground, a very severe threat to himself and others, and he put himself in danger to do the right thing. That's how I see the totality of the case. And that's why I say thank God for the jury system.
Absolutely. That's what it always drives me crazy whenever people ask me for help getting out of jury duty. You know, this is all the country asks of you. Go and serve jury duty. This is what the system relies upon. Lastly, I have to ask you to put on your law enforcement cap for a second. The suspect in this shooting of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United, was apprehended. A 26-year-old man, Luigi Mangione. How would you characterize the law enforcement response on this one? Do you think the NYPD has done a good job handling this investigation and the manhunt thus far?
I don't think they've done a good job. I think they've done an absolutely phenomenal job. It's amazing. I mean, before they even identified the suspect, they basically created a documentary. You know, Mangione, 10 days in New York. I mean, from the time he checked in to the youth hostel right up until, when he was cooling his heels at the Starbucks before the shooting, then the shooting, then the cutting through the alleyway, then grabbing an e-bike, riding through Central Park. I mean, taking the bus in, taking the bus out. The thousands of hours of videos and surveillance footage that they pieced together. Even I didn't know that it could be that thorough. I think this is a model not just for the country, it's a model for the world what they were able to do. And then roll them up as quickly as they did in Pennsylvania without any violence. You know, kudos to, my old colleagues at the NYPD. I think they gave the world a lesson in what the world's premier police department can do. That's what I think.
Judge George Grasso, it is always a treat to talk with you. I will look forward to our next exchange. Thanks for staying up late with us. I know what a busy day you had.
All right. Thanks, Frank. Good luck to you. Hope to see you.
Thank you. If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you can give me a call. 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.